right,
Yeah.
let's get this show on the road. Man, dude,
Yeah.
I was impressed with you the other night when we got on there, and it was like 10 o'clock at night. I thought for sure
Yeah.
you landed and you were home, and you
Oh,
were
yeah.
done for the day. And you're like, no, what airport were you in?
I was in Salt Lake City.
Man, so what time did you get home?
We arrived in Charlotte about 6 a.m., so I got home about 9 a.m.
Okay.
And
And then
then
that's where, how far is that from your house?
Charlotte. So Charlotte's probably 2.5 hours. Like I said, we touched down in Charlotte at 6 a.m. and then got home about 9 a.m. And
Long
then,
day.
yeah, and then had clients I had people bring 3 horses yesterday, and then taught a lesson at 6:30, and then got home about 8.
I don't know about
And
you,
then
man.
I was
But sometimes,
tired.
yeah, I believe it. I don't know about you, but I find that sometimes, like a crazy trip like that, where you're going to get home at like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and you've been traveling all night, you could have a tendency to want to like curl up and like make breakfast and chill out for a while. But if you have clients scheduled and stuff like on the books and the calendar already set to go, kind of makes you get home, like pull up your bootstraps and get at it. And then you realize you can do it. Like, it's not a big deal. But I find like coming home from a crazy little trip like that, and then like having stuff I already have to do, like it kind of sucks. I'm not looking forward to it sometimes, but it kind of makes you do it, makes you get up and get out. And then you're like, this is easy. I can do this. Not a problem.
Sure. Now, I will be completely honest. This morning I slept in until about 9 o'clock because I didn't have, So I mean, it, like, because you've just been going, and I'm pretty good. Like, I like to think I'm pretty tough about a lot of things. Like, hot and cold don't really bother me. I'm pretty good if I like have to miss a meal or something like that. But if I have to operate too long without sleep, man, I can do it, but just like the quality of person that I am in terms of like my attention to detail and things like that, it just goes out the window. So I slept till about 9 and then just woke up, didn't eat breakfast, and went straight to the barn. Started at 9:30, and now I'd say I'm back. So I just needed that reset of about like 10 hours of sleep. And now I'm good. So
Do you look forward to sleep like quite a bit? Like, what's
No.
your favorite thing to do?
Favorite thing to do?
Well, like as an activity, like I look forward to sleep quite a bit.
I don't
lately.
look forward to sleep.
I've never
I
looked
like
forward to it in my
sleeping.
life. Yeah.
I like sleeping, but like I'm one of those people when like 10 o'clock at night rolls around, I'm thinking about the next day, and I'm like excited and I'm ready to do stuff. And obviously I'm glad I don't, but if I could just like hit fast forward right there and wake up the next morning and feel energized and revived, I would 100, like in that moment, I would do that.
Yeah, I've never, like when I was a little kid, I hated going to bed at night. And I would even try to stay up all night long. I don't think it ever worked, but I would try. And I hated nap times. Like that, I thought that was so weird. Like my mom would try to get us to take a nap, and I wanted to be out with all the guys doing guy stuff. But now, if I get a chance to take a nap, I'm taking a nap. And when I go to bed at night, like I don't know if I like love going to sleep, but when I'm asleep, if somebody calls me or my phone beeps or somebody does something that wakes me up, like it halfway ticks me off. Like I feel protective of my sleep, like almost like I feel protective of our podcast. If I was sitting here talking to you and someone busted in the door, I'd be like, hey, get out of here, like, shh, this is our time. That's how I feel about sleep. And in the morning, like I get up when my alarm goes off, but I'm very reverent about it. And if I have an extra 5 minutes, like I don't hit the snooze like a lazy person wanting to sleep. I hit the snooze like a person that values this great medicine that's good for my body, that's healing me and like helping me be rejuvenated. And I'm like, okay, I'll look at my phone real quick and I'll be like, all right, I look at my calendar. Okay, I'm going to do 5 more minutes, and I'll do like 5 more minutes of sleep, and I just enjoy it. And actually, those extra 5 minutes when I hit the snooze button are the most precious, most rejuvenating, enjoyable hours of the whole night. And then it like beeps in 5 minutes, and I'm like, all right. And then I think of like someone like Jocko, like talking about sleep, sleeping in being your dream killer. And I like get out of bed. But I don't mind hitting the snooze if I have the time, and I treat it like almost like taking medicine. I'm like, I gotta get a little more sleep, like cap off that battery power, and then I'm gonna go. And I think it's just been hectic around here, but it's made me appreciate sleep at a whole new level.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you were asking me, like, do I enjoy going to sleep? Like, at night? Not really. But kind of the same deal. There's nothing better than going back to sleep. Like, after you've woken up, like, going back to sleep.
100%.
Yeah. Like, I honestly, like, one of the most enjoyable things for me is if you have maybe like a Sunday where you don't have a lot of things planned, and you like, I don't like, sometimes I'll wake up maybe around 6:30, just like without an alarm, because it's kind of when I wake up most mornings. And I'll like wake up, maybe stroll to the bathroom, like stretch a little bit, like walk around, and then I'll get back in bed and maybe sleep for another hour or something, and then wake up and cook breakfast and stuff. And oh man, that, like, when you're already sleeping and you can go back to sleep, that is a great feeling. And obviously you can't do it all the time because of practicality's sake. Like, most days you got to get up and go live your life. But kind of like you, man, I agree. There are times where you need to push through. I mean, I kind of had one of those times. Like you said, you got stuff on the schedule, you got to push through and be motivated. But the people who are like, oh yeah, you're sleeping your life away, blah 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 blah, it's like, I don't really subscribe to that. I feel like if I'm well rested more than anything else, I get like the most bang for my buck out of the time I'm awake.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. When those moments like that too, when you're like going back to bed and then getting up and making breakfast and bumming around, I start channeling my inner Louis V or whoever was in power in France back in the 15th century. Because if you ever heard that today in America, I think it's something like the lower class has a higher standard of living than the dynasty of the 15th century in France.
Mm-hmm.
So when like things are going really bad, you think they're terrible, and you're at the bottom of the rung, you're still doing better than like kings of past civilizations in terms of like your quality of life. And so
yeah,
it just feels good. You're like walking around your little palace, making your breakfast.
Oh yeah.
In your slippers, and like you don't have to get up and just like fall right into the work line, eat some sour mush out of a pan, get whipped into shape by your nasty boss. Pretty nice.
Yeah.
It's good life, even for a humble, meager horse trainer like myself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This conversation reminds me, there was a podcast I listened to, and I don't really know anything about the CrossFit world. But there was this guy who was like this really competitive, successful CrossFitter. And like one of the taglines that got me to listen to the whole podcast was, he said, if sleep wasn't like a naturally occurring thing, it would be considered a PED. Like, from when he started being a competitive CrossFitter to now, he said the thing that improved his life the most was really improving his sleep. and it was just like it paid dividends on his work, because obviously that's when your body repairs itself, that's when it grows. So it's super important. But I think it has, it's something to be said for riding, or even the business world too, because your brain operates so much better on a bunch of sleep. And when you're riding, obviously it's physical, but like your nervous system operates so much better. You just, when you wake up in the morning after a good night's sleep and you like feel sharp, it's almost like you got spidey senses or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how the narrative has kind of shifted amongst like hardworking, like high output individuals, where it used to be, sleep when you're dead. I remember telling people that like 3 years ago. I don't mean that as I'm one of those people, just like repeating that. People would say, "Oh, you ought to get some sleep," or you would pull like a 24-hour or 36-hour trip, and they'd say, "Oh, you ought to get some sleep." You'd say, sleep when you're dead." But it didn't feel right. It just felt cool to say that. But I remember hearing something similar from, I think it was Andrew Huberman. He said that, sleep is the number one performance enhancing thing you can add to your life. If you're trying to do something for your health, start sleeping. If you can sleep and then eat clean, and those two put together, you're so far ahead of the ball game. And
yeah,
it's important, man.
Those matter way
like,
more than exercise.
Yeah. And I think I'm just learning to put that stuff first in my life. Like even with employers and loved ones, like you want to put, these are important things in our lives, right? But you can't even take care of them properly if you're not putting the things in your life in the proper place that actually take care of you. And so like that's a problem I've had for years, is taking on this project and taking on that project, taking on friendships, taking on different responsibilities, and being really proud of that, but then not taking care of myself enough to even have the capacity to take care of those commitments, to the point where like there are times where your past self might have said, "Yeah, I'll help out with that," or "I'll do this," and instead you're like, "No, I got to go. I need to get some sleep because tomorrow's going to come around. Like there's important stuff tomorrow that's already on the calendar that I need to do." So as fun as this would be, or as much as I know it would mean something to you, to like hang out now, and it's almost like you're trying to balance out your own output, for other people or projects you're trying to work on, instead of being so. Well, I think it's a product of being more of a far-sighted person, instead of just being someone who's like, "Well, I don't know, tomorrow may not come, but I'll just do it all right now." I mean, it's good to be present, but to like think long term. That's why, like, I remember we had a guy here at the ranch, and he was really excited about, like these books about being present. But like sometimes I think some people work on that so much, they're so present that they don't even think ahead. They just start getting really present, and then their life starts just turning into a train wreck because they're so present that they don't really think about the future. And I know I've been a very present person and not thought about the future because I didn't really want to deal with it. I just figured, it'll all work out. But I'm learning, if you look ahead more, then you start realizing, I need to sleep more tonight, or I need to take some time off, spend time with this person, or, like nurture this relationship now so it pays dividends later, instead of being so focused on the now that you don't even like look out ahead at where you're going or what you might need in the future out of yourself.
Yeah. You have to be both, right? Because like in our line of work, being present is pivotal, because you talk about horses live in the moment. You need to live at the moment. Like we've heard that repeated to us by our mentors over and over again, but it is, I feel like I say this about everything and it's so cliche, but it's a balance where you have to be able to live in the moment, but then, maybe this moment is the moment where you look ahead and plan things. Maybe in this moment, this is the planning moment, and then you can be able to switch gears and be like, okay, now I'm back to being aware of everything around me.
Yeah. Yeah, with all the noise and all the people telling you like how you ought to do it to like get ahead and be successful. The only one that really holds sand to me, like 100% every day, all the way, is the work hard one. Like whatever life, trail you're going to go down, like good on you. Just you're going to have to work hard. Even like the people who are like, do this for 10 minutes every day, and you'll earn 100,000 a month. Well, that's going to be about the hardest 10 minutes of anyone who's ever lived. Maybe it's true. Maybe you can do it for 10 minutes every day and earn 100,000 a month, but that's going to be a daggum hard 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. You were talking about the taking care of yourself first thing. That reminded me of something when I was growing up. My mom used to say a lot because she taught a lot of people and had a lot of like college kids and mentored a lot of people. And that happens. I feel like it especially happens to people in kind of like that early adulthood, like early 20s type time period where everyone just starts running around because you get all this freedom and you have all this like bandwidth to offer, right? And she said, when they're briefing you on what to do when a plane's going down and the oxygen masks drop, they say make sure you put your oxygen mask on first before you help anyone else. Because otherwise you're not really going to be able to help anyone else, not really effectively, And she said, and she talked to people who are getting spread too thin, and it's like, it sounds to me like you're worrying about everyone else's mask before you go ahead and put your oxygen mask on. And she used that analogy a lot, and that always stuck with me when I was getting too busy, too spread thin. I'm like, okay, trying to do this, trying to do that, and maybe I mean well, but I'm not being diligent enough to take care of myself. And taking care of yourself doesn't mean only caring about yourself. It means you need to take the time to where you are 100%, and then you can actually go into the world and be effective at whatever it is you're trying to do. Start colts for people, or be a good partner in a relationship or whatever.
Yeah, that's even a biblical principle, and the one that comes to mind is when Jesus told them you have to take the log out of your own eye before you can take the speck out of someone else's eye. And there's a lot of people. Heck, I do that a lot. You go, whether it's a physical thing where you're trying to help someone out in need, you really don't have anything to give, or it's like you said, especially with a loved one or in a relationship where you can see what they're doing wrong so easily, and it's probably only because they're doing the same thing you're doing, and it's like a billboard in your face. So you recognize it in them immediately, but 9 times out of 10, you're the chief culprit.
Yeah.
That's really good, man. So did your mom, like, was she the kind of person that kind of gathered, like always had, people around her that like came to her for help, and just kind of like a mother hen kind of character that, people
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
help
she
people out in
definitely.
life as a friend and a mentor?
Yeah, well, she was a coach and a teacher, so that was like kind of inherently in her line of work, But then also, yeah, just like a super hyper maternal person.
Man,
So
I think about your, I think about you guys, and I think about your mom now every time that I see an old pickup. Because then you pointed out that old pickup, and so every time I see an old, like a 1950s like pickup go by, I'm like, oh, that's just
hmm
like Joe's mom's pickup. That would be really
yeah,
cool if you got the McDonald Farms logo on there. You could get. Have you seen those old like 2-horse like gooseneck trailers? They're like mini, like little short ones. You can pull them with like an old antique pickup. You could put together like an old, like rhinestone cowboy outfit. Like go down to the. That'd be a pretty cool rig if you were doing little clinics or lessons, and everyone's like you show up in the morning, you're gonna do it, and everyone's like waiting for the guy to show up to teach. And you pull up in like a 1955, Ford flatbed with a little like vintage 2-horse, gooseneck trailer.
Oh, I've got a bumper. It's here on the farm. I haven't shown you. Who knows? It might be all rusted to hell now because I don't think they've used it forever. But it's like it's one of those bumper pull trailers with no top on it.
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about? Like the horses like sit there.
Does it kind of have like a bit of a flared front, so it kind of kicks the wind up and over their head, or is it just like knock the top right off?
No, it's like a stock trailer, and it was painted green.
Oh yeah,
like a forest green, and it's like a stock trailer, just with no roof.
Wow. Does it have any tubes or anything to hang a tarp over the top?
It's got like piping. It's like pipe fence on the top, basically.
Okay.
But
yeah. They can still put their.
But like if you were to put a tarp over the top, you couldn't fit a horse because it's not that tall.
Okay. Oh wow. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Like you stand there and like you could see like the horses sticking their head up out of it.
Huh.
There was a guy. There was a guy who ran the equine program at Tech, and he had one of those. And my dad would tell stories about like driving places back when he was like doing pack trips. And this guy would put like 2 horses and his mule in this trailer with no top, and and they were going down some like windy roads in Virginia to get to their campsite, and they had these like old train bridges they had to get under with not a lot of clearance. And he said he like went around this curve, and he was probably like 50 feet from going under this bridge. And when they went around this curve, about got 50 feet from the bridge, he watched both horses and that mule just put their head straight down, so you couldn't see them popping out of the trailer anymore. And he went back to that spot every year, and he was like, as soon as we went around the curve, it was like those horses knew it was coming, that tight little tunnel was coming, and they were about to go through it. It was like funny. Back up there. You know where Buck had his clinic there near the Greenbrier in West Virginia?
Yeah.
It was like that way. So there's all those little windy roads that were like tiny little coal mine railroads and stuff.
Yeah, I think the first time I saw one of those trailers was on an old Roy Rogers movie called like Danger in the Pecos or something. And he's driving across the prairie in like a 1930s like big old Ford like boat of a car, and he's got one of those trailers, but it was a 1-horse trailer, but it was kind of cool looking. Like it had nice body lines, almost like the old cars. And then the front of it came up, and the hood kind of swooped over, so it kicked the air up and around the horse, and it even had like little boat windows in the front, little round boat windows. And it was like painted down the side, and triggers stood in there, probably all saddled up with silver tack and stuff. And I remember thinking that would be the cat's meow if you could get a trailer like that. And there was an old junkyard we used to drive past all the time, and they had an old trailer like that sitting out there, probably all rusted out too. But I wanted to get that thing for years, like fix it up, paint it, shine it up, like put my horse in there, just drive around.
Yeah.
Roy was the man.
I'd love to.
And I wanted to be like Roy.
I could see that. I could see that a lot in you and your like dress and stuff.
I used to have tapaderos. If I got a new saddle, I'd make a big set of tapaderos. Now, Roy's tapaderos, that'd be hard to beat. Our neighbor, we know this guy down the road, and he just moved here from, I don't know, like Glendale, California, or somewhere out there. And he worked for a company. I forget the name of the company, but they made a lot of those rhinestone saddles and like all the cowboy gear with the silver on it. And he's got to be in his early 70s. So I don't know if he worked on any of the ones for Roy Rogers, but he did build a saddle for who was the other singing cowboy? He was a famous one. Gene Autry.
Oh,
He built a
yep.
saddle for Gene Autry, like in his later years, and he had all the stuff from that. But that's like a whole different era. That's when cowboys caught on in the like 1930s, 1940s, a little bit in
Yeah.
the 50s. Like they
That
were
was
hot
like
stuff. Like a guy like what's
the
his name?
first
The guy
Yellowstone.
who, yeah, like Will Rogers. Like I've heard people say Will Rogers could have become president. That would have been a heck of a president. That
Yeah.
guy was something else. But those guys were celebrities. Or like who's the guy? Something early cowboy star in the even silent cowboy movies.
Randolph Scott.
Yeah,
Do
he
you know
was
who that
big.
is?
But I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some great old movies with Randolph Scott.
Yeah.
But,
You know, the
Tom
only
Mix.
reason oh yeah, Tom Nix.
And
The
that
only
like
reason I know who
household name.
Randolph Scott is Blazing Saddles.
Yeah, okay. I thought that would come up.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
and it's such a good reference too. He's
It's
like, oh,
like
you're
you
not
do
going
it
to do
for
it for me.
Randolph
They would
Scott.
do it for Randolph Scott.
And everyone
Randolph
takes their
Scott
hat
movies.
off.
Yeah, but Randolph Scott movies had a little bit of finesse. Like a couple of
Yeah.
Randolph Scott movies were directed by, who's the guy that he used to do he did like mystery movies and really suspenseful. He was like one of the first guys to do like mystery and suspense movies. They were
I don't know.
I mean, they were like
Your classic cinema knowledge far outweighs mine.
that's not doing too good right now though because I can't remember any of the names. Wood
Wow.
Cox.
You know
Whatever.
where Randolph Scott is from?
Oh gosh, he's from Virginia.
Yeah, he's from Orange County, Virginia. That's
How about
surprising.
that?
Yeah.
That's not yeah.
I guess it's
I feel
not
like
that
I remember
surprising,
seeing that. No,
but
a lot of those guys came from the East Coast. I
yeah.
think Roy Rogers was from Ohio, if I'm not mistaken, or Missouri.
Yeah.
No, but I think it was Ohio.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can't think of that guy's name. It might come back to me, but yeah, that was the golden era of cowboy celebrities.
Yeah.
Something else.
Yeah.
Because like guys would go to Hollywood, and if they could sing a little bit and rode a horse, like they were constantly trying to take guys and figure out if they could make them into cowboy stars.
Yeah.
There's a great, what's her name? She was Roy's wife, Dale Evans. Her autobiography, it's a great read if you ever get a chance. It's called Woman at the Well, and it paints a unique picture of Hollywood, and especially the people in the cowboy movie world. I mean, I'm sure a lot of junk went on and stuff that wasn't great, but it painted that scene, like Roy and his buddies and those producers and those actors, and like going out and filming westerns on ranches on location, and like actors getting to know their horses and like buying them after the movies, and like it painted a really cool picture of like movie making in the 1940s.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just like, oh yeah, Bonanza. But I feel like not only was it the golden age for that stuff, but it was just like the golden age of cinema. It was like
Yeah.
it was like America as a whole was just trying to consume as much of that media as they could, and because of it, like there was just a plethora. Like, it's probably not. I look at that as more of an art, but it's probably not dissimilar to like for example, music. Like the internet kind of made music. Now anyone can get out there, right? You don't have to be in with a radio station, and that was like for the first time, like, okay, in the 1920s or whatever, I don't know the numbers, and it's probably going to be wildly inaccurate, but say you make say there's like 50 movies made a year, And then all of a sudden there's like 50 movies a month that come out. And so you just, of course you're going to have a golden age, because like the more you make, the better you're going to get, and the more the competition is going to be. So like you've got to become better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Alfred Hitchcock. That's the name of the guy. I was trying to remember. Someone listening probably already realized that. But Alfred Hitchcock, he made some of those movies. I feel like he's the one that this could be totally off too. I think he directed The Birds though.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. But he directed what's his name? The guy we were just talking about, Randolph Scott, in a couple of movies. Like there is a great movie about this cabin back in the woods, and Randolph Scott comes along and he stays with them, and there's like an old man that lives in the attic, and people keep dying mysteriously. But for an old black and white movie, and this thing, it's almost a silent movie, but it's not, it's old. And for that old of a movie, it will keep you on the edge of your seat. Like it's very well done. Something about Randolph Scott, he didn't have that kind of fake like TV presence, and it wasn't too goofy. Like he was still this kind of big American strapping male kind of character.
He was 6'3".
Was smart.
I'm looking at his bio right now.
All that stuff. Yeah. I feel like he was a war hero too, but maybe not.
I don't know. I could find that out, I'm sure.
There's a lot of things about him too. But
I'm sure we've talked about this at some point on the podcast, but what's your favorite Western?
Favorite Western?
Yeah.
Everybody says the Lonesome Dove movies, which I like them, but I wouldn't. Yeah.
He was a World War I veteran.
Okay.
And I don't think he ever. No, he went in the field. Yeah, he was a part of the North Carolina National Guard in World War I, and eventually they got deployed. And then he was out of the military, and he got his degree in textile engineering and manufacturing from the University of North Carolina. Well, no, he didn't get his degree. That's what he studied, and then he eventually dropped out and then moved to Hollywood. So there you go.
There's a lot of textile people in North Carolina, isn't there?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what my cousin does. Her
her
master's degree is in textiles from NC State. And like when she went to school there, she went to school with like people from Germany and people from the UK, and they were like, like North Carolina State has like one of the top 5 textile programs in the world. It's like a really big deal to get into that program.
Is that where you just read that Randolph Scott went to the same place?
He went to North Carolina, the University of North Carolina.
Okay.
Which is a different university from NC State. But I don't know the history. They might have been the same thing back in the 20s. And then split off. But I don't know.
Yeah. That's interesting. Man, when someone tells me that they are like a textile expert, that is about like, it's probably what it sounds like when I tell them that I work with horses. I have no idea what that job entails.
She designs socks for a living. Like she worked for this other company, but they would like design and set up how to manufacture like Patagonia socks, like really nice hiking socks and stuff like that. And so she knows like everything about all the different wool fibers and like how you can spin them together and like all these different things.
I guess that's a job. I mean, you've probably had a pair of socks before that will not stay up for anything. They like bunch up and eventually end up all knotted down in your
Hmm.
footwear somewhere. So I'm glad we have good
I'll
people
say
working on
this:
that.
she gives Kaylee and I socks for like every Christmas because she just like gets them for free. But they're like the nicest pair of socks in my wardrobe. That's for darn sure. They're
Yeah,
incredibly comfortable. Never do that. So they must be doing something right over there. They're
they
like
teach them well.
expensive too. Like
Yeah,
I would never pay that much money for socks, but it's nice to have a pair every now and then.
yeah. When you're like, especially when you're poor and you're scrounging by and you go buy socks, like the only thing you're worried about is the maximum amount of socks in the package for the least amount of price.
Yep.
And somehow that seems like a good idea, even though you come back to buy more socks every 6 months. Somehow it doesn't quite make it through your thick head that if you bought higher quality socks and less of them, you would have them longer. But
Yeah.
I remember being in many a store, especially in Montana, on like a $600 a month paycheck, like looking for the biggest, blossoming bag of Fruit of the Loom socks and like get like a bonus pack. So you've got 12 plus two pairs for $9.95. You'd blow through those in about 6 months.
Yeah. So I didn't mean to derail things, but what's your favorite Western? Lonesome Dove's a good pick though.
No, 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 no. So I was saying, yeah, it is good for people that would pick that. But like, I like that movie. I like what's another big like Western favorite. You've got Lonesome Dove. You've got that one with Kevin Costner when they're shooting the bad guys. I guess they're always shooting bad guys.
Um.
They're on the plains and his dog gets shot. Open Range.
Oh,
That's a
yeah.
good one.
What's
But
and then there's one that's not open range, but it's very similar, and it's got Robert Duvall in it.
yeah.
But open range always
Is it
comes
No
to mind.
Country for Old Men? I don't know.
No. Open
But you
range,
know what
yeah.
I
Open range also has Robert Duvall. Man, that's a
yeah,
star-studded
yeah.
movie.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a great
Kevin
movie.
Costner and Robert Duvall. Yeah, I always think of Open Range.
That is a very good movie. But one of my favorites, I'll just go ahead and put it down as my favorite. I love Hidalgo. And
Yeah,
I know you like that movie too, but
yeah,
I love that movie. That is such a good movie.
yeah. Well, we were talking about it when you were up here. That's my favorite horse movie. You know, because I feel like there's westerns that aren't horse movies, and then there's definitely horse movies that aren't westerns. But I feel like that's a movie that is very horse oriented and is also a really good western. Like it would hold up. It's not hard to be a good horse movie because a lot of them are cheesy. There's a handful of good ones, but there's a lot of cheesy horse movies. But it also holds up in the western genre. I feel like.
Yeah. That's one of my favorites. Um, what about you? I mean, I know you like Hidalgo. We've just mentioned the other two, but is there one
Yeah.
that you really, really hold up there above the others?
Um. Well, we've talked about it. How like you and I are very different in taste sometimes. Um. And I feel like it's not everyone's. Like I think everyone likes it, but it's not necessarily everyone's cup of tea because it's a little off the beat western. But my personal favorite in terms of a movie, I mean, I don't. The Outlaw Josie Wales. It's an incredibly good western. It might be my favorite western.
It's a good one. It's a
Yeah.
heavy movie.
Well, that's the thing. It's not like a John Wayne flick, right? It's not like the good guys win and um all this stuff. It's like very like yeah, it weighs you down to watch it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's some of those Clint Eastwood movies, they're pretty. He played that well, and I remember talking to somebody that I don't think they knew him that well, but they had been around him a little bit, and they said Clint Eastwood is the most soft-spoken, quiet, mild guy you would ever meet. And on film and in westerns, he is like the badass, mother trucker of anybody. That's. I think that's kind of cool. I like that. Imagine if in real life he was this really hardened guy who was kind of like gruff and on edge, easy to tick him off. He didn't mind putting you away at the end of his 45 forever if he didn't like you that much.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice to know that he's actually a nice guy.
Yeah.
Talking about this though, it reminded me of some other guys like in Randolph Scott's era. I think the guy from It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart. I kept wanting to say Jimmy Carter, and I knew that wasn't it. Yeah, Jimmy Stewart.
And also, he was a World War II. And you know what? He was in World War One. No, he was in World War II, and he was an Air Force pilot. I don't know if we had an Air Force then. He was probably in the Navy, and he flew planes in the Navy during World War II. And apparently, he flew in the same squadron as Clark Gable. The guy from Gone with the Wind.
Oh, yep.
And they would fly, from England and fly over Normandy and do strip bombing in Germany, France.
Yeah.
Like, that's a hell of an era. And those guys had both been actors before going to war, and then they came home and they went back to acting. Like, nowadays, all these celebrities, get excited about popular causes and, get out there on the red carpet and, yada yada, make it sound like they're really doing something hard. Like, those guys went out there and went to war. Very impressive.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be easy to take those guys seriously when they got home. If they were trying to sell you a product or trying to start up something, like, it'd be easy to get behind them because you would recognize their character. And if they were trying to do something or sell something or promote something, it wouldn't be hard to get behind that. They really, proved their mettle.
Yeah. He was
Heck of a time
from
to be alive.
He was from Pennsylvania. And Jimmy Stewart graduated from Princeton, of all places.
How about that? That reminded me, because I always get Jimmy Stewart and Randolph Scott confused with the military time, but I'm pretty sure if you dig Randolph Scott, he served in World War I, and he tried to serve in World War II, but he sustained a back injury. I don't know if it was in the war or after the war, but they wouldn't let him re-enlist. He was too old, because he's like a good 10 or 15 years beyond those guys.
Yeah, I was going to say,
he tried to go back.
12
and they wouldn't let
years.
him.
He's like 12 years older than
that's remarkable.
Jimmy Stewart.
I guess old Prince Harry. I mean, he made it to Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
Well,
that's
we all
like
hate on Prince Harry, but he was over there shooting it up.
Yeah. The World War II, like that's a whole different deal. Like, that's what you did, right? If you're like an able-bodied man between like 18 and 40,
Yeah.
like, enlisting's what you did,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. You didn't want to be a guy
I know
who
pretty
didn't
much
enlist.
every male in my family. They went into World War II, except for the ones who were like heading up their various farms or ranches.
Yeah.
Because you didn't get drafted if you were a farmer or a rancher. Because obviously you need the food to feed everyone. It doesn't make a lot of sense to draft those guys.
That's kind of like that, taking care of putting on your own mask before you put on everyone else's.
Yeah, exactly.
You won't be able to put on their mask. Yeah, that, like, my granddad, both of his older brothers served, and he enlisted. He was 18, and he was on the boat when the Battle of the Bulge happened, and that was a big turning point. I mean, like that was right near the end. Both of his brothers served and fought at the Battle of the Bulge in France, and then he was on the boat, and they hadn't even, they were still in the harbor when they crossed the big pond there, and then the war ended. And he would talk about that a lot. Like he felt like he missed out. He scrambled and tried to enlist and get over there as fast as he could. But
Yeah.
people talk about that was the last great war, and that's a good way to know that was the last great war. In the last, whatever. We don't really know what wars are great necessarily and what ones aren't. But like in our last, in our closest history, and the nearest history to us, when you look at that war versus like, the Vietnam War, where you had guys escaping to Canada and doing all kinds of things to get out of enlisting, versus World War II, where you had people just going in head first.
Yeah.
But again, I guess that's however you paint the cause of the war, right? Because look at the Iraq War. Like everyone signed up for that. But then now there's guys looking back going, well, I'm happy to have served with my friends. Like I'm proud of what I did. But at the same time, like our government lied to us, so about a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, it was a tough sell. Like World War II, it was cut and dry. Like these are the teams, and they did the whole deal. There wasn't a that's the tough thing about, like you said, a Vietnamese war, or even worse, like a war on terror or something like that. It's when you're not fighting entities, sovereign entities, the lines start getting a little muddy in terms of who's standing for what,
Yeah.
And obviously, history's written by the victors, but it's a pretty hard sell for like it's pretty large consensus. It's like, yeah, Nazis are bad. Nazis and those who align themselves with Nazis, that's a bad thing. And there's not a lot of wiggle room there,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a pretty clear threat. It was, if we don't stop them there, then they're going to come here. They're going to come here, and they're going to take over. And the ironic thing is that the Japs decided to do the same thing at the same time. Like, how weird is that?
Yeah.
So then you're fighting two wars at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the other thing too. Like World War I, you had, I think it's called like the Zimmerman telegram, where the Germany sent the telegram to Mexico, asking them, like, Mexico to join the war, with like Germany and all their powers. And so then obviously that's kind of a clear and imminent threat if you have Mexico going against all your allies in a war. And that kind of sent us into World War I. And then you have Pearl Harbor. And I mean, that's the last attack there's been on American soil by another sovereign nation. So like, how cut and dry does it get after that? Like we had to intervene in Korea. We had to go to Korea. We had to go to Vietnam. And we were trying to prevent these regime changes. But Pearl Harbor was like, oh no, they're coming straight at us. This isn't intervention. This is self-defense.
Gosh, have you ever listened to what would it have been, Roosevelt's declaration of war the day after the Pearl Harbor attack? I think it would have been Roosevelt, or would it have been who came after Roosevelt?
I think you're right.
Yeah, because we changed presidents halfway through the conflict, right?
Yeah, but
Truman. It might have been.
Yeah, no, it was definitely
No,
definitely Roosevelt. It was definitely
Roosevelt.
FDR.
Yeah, FDR. His
Because that's
speech.
when he does the speech where it's like a day that will live in infamy.
Yeah. But boy, what a standard for presidents. Like he gets on the air and he's like, yesterday at this time we were attacked. And then this day we were attacked. And he says everything that happened. And then he says, we declare war on the sovereign, nation of Japan. Like none of this yucking around and mincing words. Like just it's so cool to think of having a leader who would just get up behind a podium and just tell you how it is. Tell you what happened, tell you what's going to happen. I'm sure they had all kind of screwy politics going on back then too, but it was a different era. I mean, you had these men who were actors who went to war, and you had a president who stood up there and said, "Hey, this is what happened. This is what we're going to do, and let's all pull together and let's go do it." And for the most part, the whole country pulled together and got something done.
Yeah,
pretty remarkable time. But that's kind of like, yeah, I mean, in a way, though, it happened probably also because the threat was so imminent,
Yeah.
Nothing terrible happens today.
Yeah. Like the closest thing that's probably happened since then is 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where it's like there's attack. But the only problem with 9/11 was it was a terrorism attack, not a sovereign nation attacking the U.S.
Right.
So then the pointing fingers gets muddied when you got flagships coming to you, and all the planes that are bombing you have Japanese flags on the side. It's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, man, I love history though. Have you seen? There's a great documentary. It's a Ken Burns documentary called The War. It's like 8.5 hours long at least.
Yeah, I know
World
of
War
it.
II in the Pacific. Yeah, that's a great documentary. I don't know where you'd find the time to watch all that now, but great documentary. But that reminds me of something I did with my dad one time. Shout out to my dad. Love him. And we listened to a lot of NPR together. We'd be doing odd jobs and driving around doing stuff. And one time, we were on this job, and he must have gone to lunch or gone to pick something up. And he got back, and he said, "Hey, I was just listening to the radio, and they had a history guy on there. And he had done this survey where he got a bunch of college students, or he was presenting somewhere, so that he had a bunch of college students in a room. And he asked them, I think he asked them, if they knew history, or if they liked history. And they said, "Yeah, I like history." He's like, "All right, how many of you guys know history pretty well?" And they're all like, "Oh, we know." And they raised their hand. He said, all right, I got a question for you. Who won the Civil War?" And like 85% of the kids said the Confederates won the Civil War, And he like asked him a few more like basic questions about history, like things that like are obvious in society today because of the outcome, and they got the answers wrong. And so we were like laughing about that, having a good old time. And right then this guy that was working for us walked up. So my dad's like, "Hey, Danny." He's like, "Danny, who won the Civil War?" And he's like, "Oh, the Rebs," or something like that, We're like, "What the heck?" So that day, like everywhere we went, we'd be at the store or just around, and we would ask people who won the Civil War. And sure enough, like close to 80% of the people thought that the Confederates won the Civil War.
That's wild.
Like,
where was
so many
this?
people.
Like where were you?
Well, we were in Virginia on the Eastern Shore. So
that's surprising. Like, because it'd be one thing if, you'd like anyone to know it, but say if you're in like Oregon or something, like a place where the Civil War didn't happen. Yeah. But to be in Virginia, which is where like 80% of the Civil War happened, and not know, that's a tough look.
It surprised me. Yeah, history's a study of its own, right? And if you don't look into it, you don't learn, then you won't know. So it makes sense looking back at it now. But we got the biggest kick out of that.
That's interesting. I remember when we were in 5th grade, I think, because if you go to like public school in Virginia, they slam Civil War history down your throat, and we'd been studying the Civil War for like 3 months, and we were going through it chronologically, like every battle, da 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 da, and like it's probably the most in-depth, like 5th grade was the most in-depth we ever got into the Civil War. And I remember they made us watch that movie Gods and Generals.
Yeah.
Which, if you ever seen that movie, that's like not the type of movie you sit down and let fifth graders watch. Like, it's a pretty graphic Civil War movie. But
it's cool they had you watch that one, though, because that's a good movie, though. That's Robert Duvall is in that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's like a good it's a good movie. I have problems with it in like it's a little like Gone with the Wind, antebellum-esque. Yeah, like I'm a proud son of Virginia, and like I have a lot of pride in my state. But the whole Civil War thing, like one of the reasons I like The Outlaw Josie Wales is it's a movie where the protagonist is someone who fought for the Confederate States of America, and he is the protagonist, and it's not because he's portrayed as having like this noble cause that was like a noble failing cause, which I'm not a huge fan of that narrative, because it's this is like a very sensitive subject, especially for people older than us. But I think the Civil War and kind of this like rewriting about like what was it about it's not a great look for the American South. And so like that's my problem with Gods and Generals is like, yeah, they have Robert E. Lee, and I mean he was undoubtedly a leader of men and all this stuff, and like a leader, but at the same time, you went to bat for a war that was about slavery. At least in my opinion, it was about slavery. People will say it's about states' rights and this and that. It's like, yeah, that's fine, but like, states' rights to what? Besides slavery. And like, I think it's a good thing the United States won the Civil War. I'll put it that way. And I get a little tired of like the Gone with the Wind narrative that like, oh, there was this noble rebel cause and it was stomped out by these like horrible Northerners that came down here, and then it's like, well, yeah, but you kind of did it to yourself too. So
that might be a podcast on its own or just a private conversation, because the only thing I would say is, you said it yourself a little while ago, is the victors write the history. And I don't know. I think there was a lot of stuff going on. I'd have to rewatch that movie. The thing I liked about it was that it gave some humanity to both sides. If you're a kid that grew up in the South who thinks, well, just like as a kid, if you grew up in the South.
Movie. Yeah. Go ahead. I won't interrupt you. Sorry about that.
No, but just, as a kid, if you grew up in the South, I'm not saying I grew up in the South. I feel like I grew up kind of both North and South a little bit, and the West. But in the South, I feel like there's this narrative that the damn Yankees, squashed us. And then in the North, there's like the damn Rebs tried to rebel. And then in the West, there's like, what the hell were they fighting over, So that movie, you had this story of a guy who was at West Point, who was like decorated and in the Union Army, who was like, I got to go back to my state because that's my state. Like, I got to go home to my people. And then was like making these tough choices. And then you had a general in the North who was like, we have to fight our brothers, And then that scene where you have the Irishman. Like, that's the part to me that gets me, and that gets into like the politics, whether it was over slavery, money, the cotton, the states' rights, whatever. I'm sure that's the whole podcast or conversation of its own, right? But it's that the conflict of men, where you had those Irish people, those Irish guys who had just gotten off the boat, fleeing the potato famine or whatever was going on in Ireland. They get here, and now they're like fighting for the North and the South. and they're marching up the hill playing bagpipes, carrying either an American flag or a rebel flag, but also carrying their clan flag. And they're like killing each other. And it's just like, what are we doing? Like, we just got here from Europe.
Yeah.
First generation. Yeah. And we're like fighting for these people. We don't even know. Our cause kind of isn't. We're getting paid. We're getting in with the locals, and we're killing our brethren. And we all just got here. And like that scene, man, I've watched that movie twice and I've cried both times. And I think that's what I like about it, is the realness of like step back from like who is right and who is wrong and be like, all these people killed each other. And whether the stories of, Jefferson Davis sending telegrams to Lincoln that weren't getting responded to, or, Lincoln using it as a Ponzi war, or actually being a good person, or, Lee doing, like all these narratives, like you hear it from both sides and just go like, holy cow, a lot of men died, and people are so easily persuaded into causes that they have no idea what they're doing. And maybe I have to watch it again, but I thought that movie captured a little bit of that, like just men being used as a tool and just how detrimental to their life that can be.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that. It illustrates kind of what most wars are, and it's regular people dying because of conflicts with politicians and aristocrats.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's what I meant, man, is that like, some of those war movies where it's like there's a narrative from one side, and you like get to know the family and this soldier and that and what's going on. And then they get out on the battlefield and they have these close-up shots of like the star team. And then the opposing army is just like a bunch of bodies. And you kind of like are rooting for your team, and you're like, yeah, just kill all those guys. And then like one guy somehow manages to kill like 10 guys to one, and you're like cheering him on, like win, if he's the last guy standing and the whole field's a bloodbath, you're like, good on you. Where in that movie, it's kind of like, oh man, I hope this guy from the South doesn't die. And then you're like, I hope this guy from the North doesn't die. And then when you see a scene where they both come on the battlefield, you're like, come on guys, just put them down. Like, you're all Americans. What are you doing? There's no like, just go kill them. Like in a Western where all the outlaws are coming. You're like, damn, if that guy just had a Gatling gun, he could shoot them all. Instead,
shoot all
you're
the
thinking,
black
like,
hats.
guys, don't shoot each other. Just quit. Stop while you're ahead.
Yeah. No, I will give you that. Like I said, I think it's a good movie, and there's a lot of actors in there I really like Robert Duvall. So I like that part of it. But I do think Gods and Generals takes some liberty with how it portrays the historical accurateness of everything. But you're right, it's a very humanizing movie.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that they had you watch that in 5th grade.
Yeah.
I agree. I would have mixed feelings about that too.
Well, I didn't get mixed feelings about it until like I was probably in college or later, and I rewatched it. At the time, I was like, God, those damn Yankees. Look at them being mean to Robert Duvall.
Yeah.
I love him, because that was like the same time you're watching like that, and like you're watching Lonesome Dove for the first time, stuff like that. I was like, look at these freaking guys from Pennsylvania being mean to Robert Duvall. I don't like them.
Yeah. Oh, that's wild. Yeah, because so many of those Western movies, when you meet the character in the Western movie, and then it turns out he's an old, fighter from the South. Like, so many of those Rebs went out and, conquered the West. But I'm sure a lot of guys from the North did too. Those would have been some wild times. There's some good movies about that, right? Where you have guys coming across each other in the West, and they had to kind of choose if they were going to keep flying the colors or just let it fly, just let it go. And it's a new country.
Do you ever watch that show Hell on Wheels?
Yeah, I think I got through like the first season, and then I had like no Wi-Fi or something, and I didn't get to finish it, and then I've never picked it back up.
That's a really good show. But the main character in that, he's from Mississippi. and he was a commander in the Civil War, and he like runs into that, causing some conflict from time to time.
Yeah. Yeah, didn't he have like he lost some family or something, right?
Yeah, it was like a Josie Wales situation where um, the baggers came and killed all his family and stuff.
Yeah. Man, to circle all the way back. That's what I found funny about Bonanza. Is Bonanza ran so long that they were always trying to write little storylines in there. And I mean, maybe they had it in order, but I'm pretty sure I've seen Bonanza from the front to the end, pretty much. And they would have storylines in there where at one point, like, they would make it sound like the Cartwrights came west after Ben had been in the Civil War. But then later on, they would like talk about this new young lawyer that was going to move to Washington named Mr. Lincoln, and they hoped that he, maybe he would become our president someday. And then Mark Twain would come like zipping through, and then like some other some other character from Old West would come through, and then the Civil War would be going on, and then the Civil War would be ended, and like all these events, like they tried to tie in real events to that show, and sometimes I don't think the timing quite lined up. I mean, they
Oh
gave it
yeah,
their all. That's a cool show, but man, they tied in so much stuff, and near the end, like that last, like I think after season, what there was like about 14 seasons, and then the 15th was like just a movie episode kind of because Dan Blocker died, but I'm pretty sure Michael Landon directed the last like 3 seasons, but then after I don't know if this is all correct, but somewhere around like the I don't know, I want to say like the 8th or 9th season, the guy that played Adam left. And then the show got kind of cool where whoever was writing it there for a while, yeah, they were adding in all these wild storylines. Like they had leprechauns one time. They were just short people in the woods. Like Haas thought they were leprechauns. Like that's the funniest one ever. And they would tie in all these historical stories. And then right at the end, it got a little bit dark for whatever reason. It got really dark. That's when Michael Landon was writing things, but such an interesting show. It just showed the sign of the times kind of because it lasted so long that you got to see like different American culture influenced on that show. And it's always cool to see that with the same actors, like how they kind of come along with the times. And for us, obviously, we didn't live from the 60s into the 70s. So to get to see that like on the big screen with like real people, even though they're playing a part, you like see it influence the show. I always found that pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, I had a history teacher say that you could always tell a lot about a society based off of how they viewed history at that time. So like things like how did people in the late 60s view the Civil War? And you could tell a lot about kind of their societal views compared to now how we view the Civil War or like how we view the 60s or something like that. So, but when you have a TV show that spans multiple decades, you can see that develop and you get like snapshots of like now this is kind of the modern sentiment and now this is kind of the modern sentiment, when you go in. Because think about how different like Bonanza Civil War is versus you get a little later and like Outlaw Josie Wales Civil War portrayal,
Yeah. Absolutely. And it even tells you something about the culture and how they like, because I don't think they were comfortable with a certain level of violence. Not even violence, like they shot plenty of people in Bonanza, but the violence in Outlaw Josie Wales, it takes
That's
you
violence.
much deeper into the violence and the visceral, imagining that you do watching the Outlaw Josie Wales. And then you can have a movie like The Hateful Eight, where like that's way more visceral, but then there's like comedic element there. It's like a society where they're willing to play. What's that video game? Red Dead Redemption, right? Like they're playing Red Dead Redemption, where your whole screen's getting obliterated with like red guts and blood, but it's still trying to stay kind of comedic. Like you're trying to make it gory, but make it watchable, make it like The
Yeah.
Walking Dead. But you're not really willing to like get someone to cry. But then, the Outlaw Josie Wales, you're like putting people in their seat, going like, oh my, what's going to happen next? Just the different stages of society where like different levels of goriness, different viewpoints, and even different presentation to the audience, so that just the way they try to make people's feelings, the way they try to manipulate your feelings, even in a different way through how that information is presented to the audience. Like what people can take, I guess, at that time.
Yeah.
What's going to be watchable.
Or what people want to see.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Really cool stuff. Man, we've like covered all the bases. But I really wanted to, unless you have more of that stuff, I really want to hear some about the colt starting though. Because that's something that I haven't made it to one yet. And I know you hadn't either. And that's kind of a focal point of our style of horsemanship. And you made it this year. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit about that. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, like, we've both talked about the colt starting. Probably a lot of our listeners know what that is. Some of them may not, but like going to the colt starting, what's the thing that surprised you the most? Like being there and experiencing it, and like it happening in real life versus how you have thought about it for years and been anticipating going.
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying it was a ton of fun. I learned a lot, got to meet a lot of people. A lot of people that kind of knew of or stuff, got to see a lot of really handy people. That was a cool thing. It was like there's people from all over the country there, and so like that was great. And everyone I met was super nice, and I had an awesome time. But someone came to drop a horse off yesterday, and they were like, "Oh, I want to hear about the colt starting." They were really excited and like, "What was it like?" Da da da. And it's a great event. And if you ever get the chance to go, I'd really encourage people to go. But at the same time, it was like I was going to a clinic to learn and hopefully get a little better, and like it wasn't like a pilgrimage to Mecca or anything like that, And like at least yesterday, and a couple people have asked me about it, like that's the biggest thing, right? Like I feel like people in the clinic world, or like anything in the horse world, or I'm sure there's like other things, like you can get so caught up in everything. It's like, oh, now you've been to a colt starting at Houlihan Ranch, and I'm like, it was awesome, and I'm going to try to go as much as I can. But like, it's a clinic, and you go there to learn stuff and get better, and at least that's my primary motive. Like meeting all the people, getting to see everyone, that's great. But if I showed up and it was just me, or if I showed up and there was a rule you're not allowed to talk to anyone for 4 days, and like only Buck can talk, and that's the rule at the clinic, I'd still go, like, because that's what it was for me. So yeah, I don't know if I was like surprised by anything. It was really cool getting to see everyone rope and stuff on the last day, especially get to watch Buck rope, because I haven't really gotten to see that before. But no, it was awesome, man. The format was a little tough because of all the rain. We were in the indoor the last 3 days, and it all worked out, but it just meant the colts in the morning, it was kind of a little more muddy, because it, like, not muddy physically, but it was kind of muddied who would go win, because it's like people would start out and then there'd be a couple colts in the pen, and there was kind of like the rest of the arena for you to do some groundwork and get your colt saddled. And then you bring it into the pen to ride it and stuff. And so like people kind of had to go in waves, if that made sense. Like I was going in the morning, but I would start out just watching, and then after like 4 or 5 people had ridden their colt, I'd go get my colt and bring it in. So, and I'm sure, as you know, like these buck clinics, they're so big. You like if you're not like super engaged and like come to ask questions, it's not like Buck's gonna like talk to you. Like the only reason he might talk to you is if you're doing something unsafe. But generally he kind of talks to a broader audience. And then if you want specific help with a specific thing you got going on, like it's root hog or die, man. You got to ask the questions because there's too many people for him to kind of cater to each person.
Was there a lot of questions being asked? More than a typical clinic?
I wouldn't say more than a typical clinic. But I mean, usually there's a lot of questions at a clinic, you know. But I just know, I know for me, I think if I always try to ask a lot of questions at clinics, and I feel like I wouldn't have gotten near as much out of it if I didn't ask questions.
Yeah.
And kind of like, sometimes you have to almost even push. Like if that was one thing I kind of learned in college. I had some professors that were like, look, you know, if a professor's not explaining something to you, you kind of have to have the stick-to-itiveness to be like, keep asking questions and like make them explain it to you because they know the information. And I don't feel like I have to be like that with Buck. I feel like he does a pretty good job explaining things. But if I want a specific thing addressed, like you can't be bashful. You got to just get in there and ask questions.
Yeah.
And, you know, every now and then you get questions that maybe trail off and don't seem as productive, but you got to get through those to get to the important information. I mean, think about the clinics you've been to. There might, after the end of the weekend, you might feel like you've learned a lot, but you could probably boil it down to like 4 or 5 nuggets of information, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then over time, the stuff that you took in that you didn't even realize that you received kind of oozes out. Or even like particular to a situation, you'll be working on something and then go, oh, I saw this at the clinic. Kind of comes back to you. The thing I kept thinking about when I'd see your photos heck, I thought about the fact I wasn't there because I wanted to come, tried to plan for it, and then I did a lot of great things instead. Equally as exciting. Don't get your feelings hurt, Buck, but some of us have fiancés and stuff, and we have to put in our time, which is the best time ever. I'm serious. And so I didn't make it, but I'll be there next year. But I kept thinking about how great it must be to see Buck starting a colt. Because we know, like, the recipe for success, for the most part, is put yourself around greatness, right? We talked about that on episode 2 or 3, the Con and the Mamba. For those of you who haven't listened to it, return to that and listen to it. It's very good. And we were talking about Kobe Bryant. But I know that was a big Kobe Bryant thing besides working hard. It's like surround yourself with greatness. And, like, if you're not doing that, like, how are you going to get better? Get around people that are better than you. And so in this line of work, like, we're both on the East Coast, right? There's some great horsemen on the East Coast, no doubt. But as far as like starting colts and doing what we're doing, there's not a ton of people that do that in the style that we do or at the level that we're trying to do, right? You don't even have to say you're great. Just you're trying to be great. There's not a lot of people doing it like that. So to be around guys starting colts who are good, that's got to be really exciting because I encounter situations all the time with colts. Heck, I was roping a new colt this afternoon in the round corral. I was just thinking about a couple things that he did differently, that horse did differently, that maybe I needed to adjust, maybe I needed to do something a little bit different. And so, I watch a lot of the Buck channel. I read a lot of books and I ask Bill questions. I do a lot of as much homework as I can. And then I try to learn from my own mistakes too. I don't have like a Tom Dorrance, you know, picture memory or anything, but try to remember what's gone wrong in the past and what goes right in the past and like apply it. But to be around a bunch of other people doing the same thing I'm doing who are hopefully better than I am, and then have Buck as the teacher there as well. I think that's a great resource. Like I'm looking forward to next year for that, just to be around greatness and like see lots of examples of the same thing happening. And then, whether you're learning from something going wrong or something going right, you're just seeing it's like speeding up the process. Because the way we do it, when we talk and we talk to our mentors and we ride a bunch of horses, but you're kind of like stacking up your own experiences one upon the other. But then you go to something like that and you get to see like, I don't know, how many colts were there?
24 colts were started by clinic participants.
Okay. So, and I'm sure some of them are pretty gentle. Maybe had a couple, rides have been messed with a little bit, and then you have some that are kind of green.
Yeah, there were definitely some that were not gentle. So,
yeah, so exactly. So you've got like 23 examples of a colt being started. So that's kind of like 23xing your progress in a way, or 23xing your exposure to colts being started. To me, I think that's great.
Plus, getting to watch Buck start a colt in person,
yeah,
which is really that was
shoots
super
that number
helpful.
way up. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because that was
it's fun watching him on video, but to be able to ask him, like you were there, you could say, "Hey, Buck, why are you doing that?"
Yeah. Or like immediately being able to compare. Obviously, it's not like we were starting the same horse, but like, okay, this is the result he got from his colt. Now let me try to work on this thing, and I'm not quite getting the same result. Like having him right there to be like, okay, so you did this and got this. I'm trying to replicate that, and I'm not getting that. What's the difference? And him being able to tell you, that's pretty awesome. And like you said, getting to watch like a bunch of handy people. I'll say this. It wasn't a surprise, but it was something I really appreciated. This is probably the thing I appreciated the most about the colt starting, and the horsemanship 2 class. I was like, wow, there are a lot of really, really handy people here that I'm able to watch right now and like see all the good things they have going on. Like that's great. Because they're like I said, it draws people from all over the country.
Yeah. Well, like that's like at the clinics when he rides his own horse. That's my favorite part because you're getting a glimpse at as high up the mountain as we know,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's easy for people to think that, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Actually, I don't really feel this way, but I think I subconsciously do sometimes. You know how we talk about like every now and then you kind of glimpse the top of the mountain and then you go back down in the valley, you work at it and you struggle and you get pissed off and then you kind of get a little glimpse again. But when people say they glimpse the top of the mountain, like what are you glimpsing yourself? Like are you really that good that you think you're riding high? I don't know. I don't ever really feel like I do anything where I'm like, oh, this is great. Hopefully I could do this again. Like typically I'm like, this feels great. I'll do that again. But to me, that's not the top of the mountain. But then go into the clinics and you watch Buck ride his horse. That's kind of like seeing the top of the mountain where you're like, oh, wow, that looks great. Or there's something I haven't even tried yet. Or just all kind of movements he does or the rapport he has with his horses. That's amazing. And like the more you do this, the more you, without sounding haughty, the more there are things you are kind of looking for. The more you're aware of some things, so next time you see him, you're like, oh, I wonder, I've kind of barely felt this. I wonder what it looks like when he does that.
Yeah.
And so you're looking for it. You're looking for him to do it or feel that with his horse. So to me, that's really encouraging. And I'm super happy for you that you made it, because I know it's a fun time, right? Like, did you feel that? You know how we feel that when we even talk to people on the podcast and afterwards, we always yak about how it went. And I know I've heard you say, man, it's fun to just talk to these guys and gals that they're in the same industry we're in. So when you're off in Blacksburg or I'm in Forsyth and we're riding horses all by ourselves, you remember those interviews and you're like, oh yeah, Kip's out there riding the horse, or I don't know, whoever it is we've talked to, they're out there riding and pursuing this too. So when you're there in person with all those people, it's got to be really encouraging to know that you're not all by yourself in this, and you got a bunch of friends. You kind of feel like you're at the it place for what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely having the sense of community. It's it kind of puts a fire in your belly for sure. And I mean, that's like, we talk about it a lot. Like, that's why we started this podcast, kind of heighten that sense of community. So yeah, like I said, man, it was really fun. Like on it, and just probably at the bottom of the list, but it's nice to just be able to go and start another colt, because you got to just keep starting colts. And to be able to go somewhere and like over the course of 4 days, it's like, oh, okay, there you go. Started another one. Hopefully we'll try to do better on the next one. But
yeah, I know you've only been home a couple days, but do you feel different going out and working horses after being home?
I mean, yeah, like I said, it's not a pilgrimage to Mecca. Like, I didn't drink holy water and now like know how to start colts.
No. But I mean, but like in terms of like your morale, is your morale like heightened or better or stronger? Like to be doing this, or do you feel about the same? Just like, yeah, that was good, or I don't know.
No, it's definitely.
Do you think did it raise your morale?
It raised my morale because, like, I guess time will tell, but I feel like I'm better now. Like, even today, I was working with. I came back to some horses and like worked with them, and just like, I'm like, okay, think about all the stuff you learned. Kind of think about like the way of being that you want to try to have, because that's the thing, is like, it's almost like you get around that frequency. You're talking about people being better than you. You just are around so many people that are doing a really good job starting these horses or riding their more made horses, and you get around that frequency and you like kind of learn to replicate it a little more. It's like, okay, this is what Buck is like, or this is what this guy was like with his colt, or whatever. And I tell you what, like, invigorates you is like, then it gets a little easier. I'm like, anytime you think you're really going good, then you get a horse that like really humbles you. So I'm sure that'll happen. But today, things felt a little easier, because like, that was the thing about watching Buck start his colt, is it almost seemed effortless. Like, have you ever had a horse come in and you're like, yeah, I mean, we'll get him started, but it's going to be work. It's going to be a lot of work to get this sucker. Like, it's almost feels like you're like chipping away at a marble statue, right?
Yeah.
We're like watching Buck start that colt, and obviously it's taking a client horse versus a colt that's been growing up at Houlihan Ranch is very different. But it's almost like Buck's just working with clay. Like clay on one of those spinny things where you just do this and then all of a sudden you get a big change, in how your pot is shaped. And some of the colts I feel like I'm just chipping away at marble. And I'm like, oh, we'll get this thing. We'll get this thing eventually. But it's like, it's just a war of attrition, And I think part of the way to like make it feel a little less like marble and a little more like clay is like seeing the changes Buck got and how little they were, and how even over 4 days they built so much, where it's like if you can just kind of like refine your eye, and that comes with starting a lot of horses, and then like you said, getting to watch other people start a lot of horses, which is really handy. Like if you can refine your eye, you can kind of see what changes are meaningful, and then what might just be kind of extracurricular activity, because you can't just reward everything, right? You know, I feel like you see that a lot. People who are like, "Oh, I got to change. It's like, well, no, you didn't, because the horse isn't doing the right thing. But Buck, just because of the time he's spent and the knowledge he's accrued, he has that eye to where, like, that colt did the slightest thing. He's like, yeah, that's good. And then it was like right there, maybe he went back to it 10 minutes later, or maybe he went back to it the next day, and it was like, oh yeah, like that carried over, and like it's more so now. And maybe like in the beginning, I wouldn't have rewarded for what he was rewarding for, because I'm like, oh, that's not enough of a change. I need more of a change. So, but you don't know what you don't know, right? And in the beginning, when you're trying to get a change and you don't have a really good eye, you're like, no, I need it on writing on a billboard. I have changed.
Yeah.
Where later maybe the changes, like him looking for a change, reminded me of like someone who's really good at like picking four-leaf clovers or something, and they're just walking like, oh, there's a change.
Yep.
There's a change. And so that it's been just really communicated to me how important that is. And when you get to go to something like that, again, time will tell, but I feel like I've been able to develop my eye a little more. So when I went back to work today, I could see these little changes, and it was a little more peaceful, because I didn't have to wait for this giant billboard change that I may or may not get with my horse.
I think that's a great analogy, the clay versus the granite. I love analogies like that, man, because if something like that sticks in your head, like when you said that, sometimes you feel like chipping away at granite, and Buck looks like he's working with clay on a wheel. It's not hard to pick who you want to be like. You're like, I don't want to be the guy trying to chip granite. I want to work with clay. So if you get that into your head, next time you're working with a horse and things aren't going well, I bet that's going to pop in my head. Be like, wait a minute. I've got my axe out. I've got my hammer out. My chisel. And I'm just trying to, like, chip at this thing. Like, what am I doing? Hold on a minute. I'm missing something. It's not supposed to feel like that. And that totally makes sense why you said, like, things feel a little bit easier. Because they are. Like, the easy path is there, right? Buck could come over and take your horse and show you how to do it. And it'd be easy for him. Like, the path is there. It's not like we have a bad horse. It's there. We're just not that good at finding it yet. But that's a good little heading to have, a good note to have in your travel plans. Like, hey man, do you feel like you're chipping at granite, or are you working with clay? Because if you want to work with clay, it's right there. It's not hard. You just have to be willing to slow down, like you're saying.
Yeah, and
man, I feel like I was there already.
Yeah. And that even happened to me, like at the clinic. I had that big black horse, and he was a full-blood Percheron, and wasn't really apt to move. He's just kind of, he was big and a little dull, and he got a lot better over the 4 days, and made some changes really fast. He's kind of a sharp horse, like not like a dopey draft like you might think of sometimes. Like he was pretty keyed in after maybe 5 minutes or so. But I told Buck, I was like, I just feel like I'm having to work really hard to move him out. And he said, show me. And I did. And I was like kicking for all I'm worth and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, well, you need to pull your rope out, and you need to get a change, and this is how you need to get a change, and kind of describe the timing of it and kind of talk me through it. And I've done that. I'm not going to say like, oh, I knew to do that, because a lot of people say that when they hear things at a clinic, like, oh yeah, I would have done that. But I have done that in the past with like a horse that's maybe doesn't have enough life in it. You use the end of your McCarty or your rope or something to get that change. But I was definitely less apt to do that in the middle of a round pen with like a couple hundred people watching me, because the last thing you want to do is be the guy who's like flogging his colt and Buck tells you to stop or something because you're being too rough on your colt. So maybe I was kind of in that state of mind. But he made the comment, he was like, yeah, you're working way too hard at this. I don't want to work that hard. So you need to offer the good deal, and then you need to get it done now. And he kind of talked me through that, and it was really helpful for me because it is like that was the exact example. Like I was chipping away at Granite, and he kind of showed me through timing, feel, and the right application. He was like, oh, here's a little bit of that clay on the wheel. Because after he explained it and kind of walked me through it, it was easy. And then there was life in the horse, and it was like, oh, I'd actually be really aware of what position I was in, because he was ready to go forward at a moment's notice after that,
Yeah.
So it was cool. I like I said, I enjoyed the whole deal, but that was the thing that stuck out to me watching him work with his colt. Was he knew where the changes were, he was confident in the changes, and he wasn't a drill sergeant about it, like show me these giant changes so I can be validated in myself that I'm getting these changes in you.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. No, I'm so glad you made it. I'm looking forward to next year. Hopefully we'll be out there together. But I guess we're probably getting towards the end of this thing. Looks like we've racked up some good time. Just the two of us. Do you anything pop out to you so far to name this episode?
I don't know.
One idea.
Granite and clay.
I know. I was thinking the same thing. For a while, I was thinking something like Time Will Tell because of our whole history escapade, but Granite and clay, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I guess we can think about it. At least we touched on it.
Yeah.
But anyhow.
Cool. And what is this, 51?
51, yep.
Oh, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, and for any of you guys listening, if you made it this far, I mean, you must have enjoyed it. And if you did, share it with a friend or go on there, give us a review. Joe was talking about community and how great that is. And, we drive this podcast, hopefully like it's clay. That's what we're trying to do. Just follow a feel wherever it goes. But one of our goals for sure is to build a community and keep having great conversations. And one of the ways you guys can help is sharing it and liking it, reviewing the podcast on Spotify or Apple, and that helps us out a lot. Helps us get on the moving on. So we appreciate all the support so far too from everyone who has helped out. So thank you guys.
Thanks everybody. See ya.